So as we return to this gospel, just as a reminder, it takes place, and the setting of it is extremely important. A lot of the context of where Jesus is in the Holy Land, whether it be in Jerusalem or beyond, is very telltale of what he's going to say, because it's the context that he's saying it in. So in this point in the gospel, he is way in northern Israel. It's a very beautiful and fertile, lush area of Israel. The rest of the country can be sort of dry and more of a desert region, but this isn't. This is a very nice area. And he's in front of the temple of the god Pan. The Romans had built this, so he's in front of the temple of the bread god as he asks this particular question. And it's about midway through his ministry, so people are talking about him. And it's in this place that he poses the most important question, not only that he could ask his apostles, his disciples, but that every Christian person has to answer for themselves. The rest of our faith makes absolutely no sense unless we get this question right, unless we believe the right answer to the question in the core of our hearts. This is the cornerstone of our faith. Now, before we get into that, just imagine what it must have been like to be with Jesus in these sort of early days or mid days of his ministry. It could be very hard, actually, for us living in the time that we're in to imagine what this time of Christ's life was, or for that matter, a lot of the ages of what the church has already been through. We are not exactly in the shining time of Christianity. Our people are falling away. Many of our own family don't practice anymore. Religious sort of leadership as a whole is at an all-time low, as is the confidence of the faithful in the religious institutions that they respectively belong to. Our time is more like the Passion of Christ than any other time in the entire church. But this time in the apostles' ministry, it was sort of at a height. The miracles, the healing, the excitement of the crowd in the midst of the people are saying all of these incredible things about him. As one of the apostles himself testifies in the gospel today, they're referring to him as Elijah. He who had ridden up to heaven in a fiery chariot and was expected to come back in the flesh again and is still expected to return in some way, shape, or form. The Lord acknowledges his spirit, at least, come in John the Baptist, but his return from heaven to be a testament at the end, or one who testifies as a witness at the end of time. Other think that maybe he's John the Baptist, back from the dead. As Moses had prophesied, a great prophet coming into the world. These are massive titles. It's not just like, hey, there's this guy from Galilee and he's a really good preacher. You got to go hear him. No, these are very, very significant titles that he's being given. Maybe to give you an idea of how this would play out, just imagine this does fit the time that we're living in. In the day and age that we're living in, if we actually got a political leader that people are like, this is like George Washington. What a man. See, at this point in time in Israel's history, they had no confidence in their religious leadership either. That's why they keep saying, this man speaks with authority. Why? Because he's not some hypocrite coward that's leading the Jewish people and completely cowtailing and bowing down to Rome. That's all they saw. Go with the mainstream for fear that we lose our kingdom. I suppose in modern language, let's just go along with the world for fear that we get sued again, for fear that they take away our property. Yes, in those days we will make all these concessions to the Roman Empire, and so we won't really be following the fullness of the Jewish faith. Sometimes it takes tremendous courage and sacrifice of, yes, our money and our property to follow God's will. And how hard it is for us to do it. Now that's how people were referring to Christ. So the grounds swell around him, if you will. But then comes the question to the actual believers, those with him right now, and that's very telling of us. Assumingly, if you're here this Sunday, you really and truly believe. And so again, this is the most important question that you need to answer for yourself. And it's deep. Because it becomes much more intimate in this moment. It's kind of like, well, tell me about what's going on out there. You guys are the scouts. What are they saying about me, about us? Well, they're saying this, they're saying that, Lord. And then that monumental seismic shift, right? But who do you say that I am? It's even more beautiful in the Gospel of John later on when he has his Eucharistic discourse and he says, do you want to go away too? Because we're his friends. If you pull anything away from what I'm saying right now, I want you to rest in that statement. I want you to think about what's going on in the world. And you've heard me talk about the stats on pornography and abortion and all the other immoralities that are going on, but even the mockery. I was just reading this morning, there's this whole leather same-sex festival in some church in France. In the church. You are his friends. You love him. And it doesn't mean that it comes without fault, right? All of these people who are here in this moment during the Passion, which I believe that we're more like in that time with the church than like this time, but later on, Peter will deny him. The rest of them will flee because they're weak and they're broken people like we are. But in your heart of hearts, do you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God? And in that belief, do you love him? Peter did. And he gives him the highest title that he could possibly give him in that moment. That's what I love about Peter. He's very spontaneous, but he's spontaneous out of his heart. It would be like saying that Jesus is coming again tomorrow. To acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah was a big, big deal. Not to mention, he goes on in the other Gospels and says, you are the Son of God, making him equal to God himself. And spontaneously out of his heart. He doesn't need to intellectually process this, right? He's seen it with his soul. And the Messiah, if that's who he is, comes with all of these other implications. He literally is the vicar of God, the King of Kings, the most important person ever in Jewish history to exist. But then in that belief, again, that we have to answer for ourselves, that's point number one, who is Jesus to you? Pope Francis just asked this in his Sunday homily. I think it's a great question. Something deeply and profoundly worthy of our meditation. Who is Jesus to you? Is Jesus an obligation, right? That you got up this morning and it was a rule that you had to come see him. Or is there something intriguing about Jesus that you know that you need in your life? It's kind of level 2. Or is Jesus so intimately a part of your life and who you are that you can't imagine living without him? Now let's reverse this for a second. I'm going off script a little bit. I think a little inspiration going on, and this could go on for a while. Because it's all about human relationship. God became man. And the greatest desire, I'm going to guess, I'll just point it out to you, in your life is to be loved. We want to be loved and really loved, and we want to love. So do you want the people in your life to love you because they have to? Try that out tonight, spouses. Gosh, I love you so much because I have to today. Dear, that made me feel so beautiful inside. Or, I love you because there's something kind of cool about you, and I guess I sort of like being around you. You kind of fulfill my life. It's like those progressive commercials. I'm an okay doctor. Great. I'm going to seek that one out, No. We always want the third when it comes to love. Either we're all in or we're not, right? Try that one out tonight, spouses. I love you because I cannot imagine my life without you. I love you because you complete me. And I would be lost if you were not in my life. Now, Jesus loves us that way. And in that love is the invitation to love him that exact same way. So the question then becomes, how do we do it? Now, this is the really amazing part about the gospel, because there's so many different levels and ways to read this writing. I really, how wonderful it would have been in the early days of the church to have actually one of the apostles not only writing, but then elaborating on it. Like, we're 2021 years later, and Father Justin sits, for, hours in front of the Blessed Sacrament trying to receive something from Christ that opens up the text, so I have something from the Sacred Heart of Jesus to share with you that inspires you to a deeper relationship with him for your salvation. But these men were with him for 3.5 years every single day, then writing these stories. So no wonder the early church exploded with power. Because they're so deep, they've lasted 2,000 years. Can you imagine the epicenter of what it must have been like to hear them? Hence, your faith is incredible. Because we're that far away from the whole thing, and somehow we're still here in the midst of the mess that we're living in. But Christ is going to teach his apostles after that confession, and they say, okay, yes, you're the Messiah. We believe in you. We're not going to leave you. What it means to love him. Now, if we look at it from a worldly standpoint, it is no wonder why Peter responds the way that he does. I really connect with Peter a lot of the times because it's this spontaneous power of okay, boom, I got the pattern figured out, and yes, let's go, and then he's way overconfident, and so the Lord's got to humble him in that moment, and he's just crushed so many times all the way through the crucifixion to the resurrection, and even humbled after that by the time he gets to the end of his life, I've been praying a lot about this lately, that he's able to say this beautiful line. When they come to nail him to the cross, as they're nailing him to the cross in the circus in Rome, they go to put the cross upright, and his line is, I am not worthy to die the way that my Lord did. And so they flipped it upside down, and he was crucified upside down. It took him his whole life. But he finally reached that degree of power, conviction, zeal, and humility. It took Peter that long. Be merciful with yourselves. It's a process. And Jesus is the one that's got us on this entire journey and path, and he's the Savior and providing for us. So in this moment, he gets it right. Second end of it is, if you're this guy, we're heading to the top. And instead, what does the Lord do? He teaches. He teaches about what it's going to mean to be this, and it's not in the ways of the world. The Son of Man is going to pay the ultimate sacrifice out of mercy and love for the salvation of the world, and he will be mocked and denied and spat upon and crucified and rejected by all these people. God forbid, Lord! And then he rebukes him, humbles him in that moment, and teaches him what? He teaches him that it is going to be all about death to self and sacrifice. So if we want to love Christ, and this is not good news, was it to Peter? And it certainly isn't in the time that we're living in, but it is going to cost. Now, here is the obvious secret that's before all of us. It becomes more obvious as you age. Real love, as a matter of fact, the love that we're looking for is always going to cost us something because it's willing the good of the other. That becomes very visible in early marriage, even more visible once you have children. Same thing happens in the priesthood over time, right? It is a gift of self to others, which is what love is, but it's not natural to us. And so the Son of God has to teach us, not only through his life, but through his death and resurrection, that this is the path that we are to follow. And it is the path of greatest resistance because it is totally foreign to who we are in our fallen nature, and we are weak in this area. And so again, Peter and the rest of the apostles fail miserably at it to begin with. So first there's the confession of faith, and then we enter into his life. But what is so unbelievably visible in the time that we're living in right now, everyone, is that as we enter into his life, you don't have to do it alone. This just keeps coming up over and over in my prayer. Christ, in your relationship with him, is going to help you and frankly do it for you. He does it through grace and the reception of Holy Communion, in your prayer and relationship with him, which is constantly growing and which you're going to see him helping you. And when you fail in it, it is totally unconditional acceptance, love, and mercy in the confessional. Now think about that from a human standpoint. Someone who is your spouse, let's say your best friend, your mom or dad, that is, mom and dad are the best example of this, that is going to be there for you nonstop, in your corner, totally helping you, totally providing for you, encouraging you, letting you fail for your own human formation and growth. And when you do, totally and absolutely unconditional, accepting, merciful love. How does that sound? I don't know about you, but it sounds like the greatest possible friend, spouse, father, mother that you could have. You have it. The whole world has it if they would just wake up to it. Because the world's way is this: instant gratification, serve yourself, and when you fail, total and absolute judgment, and there's not going to be anybody there to help you. You are your own defense. The only person looking out for you is you. Sounds pretty awful and incredibly lonely to me. The way of love, the way of the world. But the way of love is the way of the cross. The way of the world is what we're being sucked into, and it's the way of self-service and instant gratification. I'm going to share a great secret with you. You and I don't know how to make ourselves happy. We do not know how to make ourselves happy. We do not even know how to govern ourselves. I think one of the greatest truths of life is that we have to get to a point where we're not looking for a government or a president or anyone, not even ourselves, to govern us, because we realize that no one knows what's best for us but one person, and that's God, who is Jesus Christ. And his way can be a difficult way, but it is a way of absolute salvation, happiness, and fulfillment, now and in the life to come. The confession of faith. Who do you really say that Jesus is? If you truly believe in him, do you trust him to provide everything for you? And in that provision, are you willing to follow the way of self-sacrifice and the cross, truly trusting that it will lead to your happiness? As we come to receive Holy Communion today, just rest in that. Wherever you're at, the very best friend that you have, the one who loves you more than anything, the Father of us all, comes to be with you today.